The Beretta M1934. Let's check it out. Beretta has been in business for right at 500 years, originally making barrels. But then right at the turn of World War I, they started making firearms. This is the M1934. It was made for the military. It's in 380 ACP. It has an all-steel frame, blowback design, and it has that open slide design. These were made from 1934 until 1991. And over 1 million of these have been made. Now, I was on the Atlantic Firearms website, happened to see it. It came with a free holster, and I've been wanting one to add to my Beretta collection. These are known for being very simple and yet very reliable. We're also going to take a look at some of the progression of other Beretta firearms that led to the M1934 and then all the way up to the 92. Like I've said in the past, when surplus firearms come into the country, they're typically pretty reasonable. But once that dries up, these just increase in value. And a lot of that has to do with the workmanship, the craftsmanship, and just the history behind these really cool firearms. All right, guys, the Beretta model 1934, or the military designation M1934. These were made from 1934 until 1991, which was a little bit surprising. I didn't know that they had continued production for that long. These have served all over the world, but especially in the Italian military and the Romanian military as well, but with other forces and a lot of police agencies as well. Again, 380 ACP, it's a very small handgun in a sense for a combat weapon, but great for officers. Now let's go ahead and make sure the gun's unloaded. It has that hill style magazine release, which is definitely European, and we have this curve, which is a finger rest, and it kind of has that boot look to it. But they do that on a lot of their older pistols. And then the magazine holds 7 rounds. Now it does have these cutouts on either side, so you can see the rounds instead of the witness holes, and so it just gives it a very open design, which in a military situation, this could really attract a lot of dirt and everything else. But good quality magazine, and this finger rest, even though it looks a little funny, it really helps when you're holding the handgun, and it has serrations across the lip. And then we'll check to make sure the gun is unloaded, and it is. Now, one of the things about Beretta is they have that open slide, and that really helps with reliability. It just allows for no stovepipes, rounds come out. Even if you have a little bit of a malfunction, it'll come through it. And it's one of the things about the Beretta 92. And really, this model came in, beautifully. I was really pleasantly surprised at how much bluing it had. This has been stored, but obviously this has not been carried much. I'm not really sure the story behind it. I did get this again from Atlantic Firearms, and one of the things that I just happened to be with it is you get a free holster. Now this is an aftermarket holster and it's military style, and this is not really something I really care about, but I've been wanting one of these because I have a number of Berettas, especially the vintage type Berettas. For some reason, I'm just a big fan of collecting these. Now it has the plastic grips and it has a lanyard loop here at the bottom. Slick front and back strap, and which is traditional for your military style firearms. And then we have these serrations, which are kind of cut into the slide, so it kind of concaves in a little bit, and it gives you a good bite to it. They're definitely directional this way, so when you're pulling it, it comes back very easily. And we have a commander style or a looped hammer with serrations as well, and so that just keeps it from getting snagged if you have one of the tang type hammers that a lot of the Western countries during World War II had. And so this just has that really small hammer, and it's going to help with no hammer bite, or for that matter, slide bite, because the slide comes up over the frame, and yet it has a little small beaver tail just to give it a little bit more up on the frame. Even if you have bigger hands, this just helps. And no magazine disconnect, which I love. Now, the other thing about this is it is a single stack. So this is currently, during that time, that was pretty much predominant. We have the Beretta logo right here, and while a lot of these models have the Italian proof marks from World War II and from different military operations, this actually was made in 1972, and it's stamped right on the slide. And of course, with your other markings, that it is a Beretta model 1934, and it does say it's in caliber 9 corto, which in Italian means short. So it's that 9mm short. In German, it's 9mm Kurz, but this is that 380 ACP caliber. And then you've got that open barrel. I love this. I mean, it just is very distinctive for your Beretta handguns. The sights are milled into the front of the slide, and then we have a dovetail here at the back. But man, there's not much. They're pretty low profile combat type sights. And what you'll see with accuracy, actually, this is a very accurate little handgun. And part of that has to do with the way the barrel's locked up to the frame, and of course that's just the way Beretta makes them. The safety is definitely different, and here we just bring it around just like this, and you're on safe, and then when you reveal the red, then you're on fire with that little arrow on it. Now, one of the things about this handgun is it will hold open on the last round, but if you release the magazine, it goes forward. Now, I hate that. I mean, that is always, especially if you're working on something or you need to, even load a magazine, you've got to rack the slide. But if I bring the safety around and then bring the slide back, I can just lift it up and it locks right into the slide. And so that way I can work with the slide being open without the magazine in it. And when I want to release the slide, I can just hit it, bring that all the way around. It is not the most efficient, but it still works. And again, these were produced in 1934. But, the Colt 1911 was designed in 1911, and it seems to have more modern features. But compared to some of the other pistols that were during this time frame, I mean, this is pretty standard. The barrel is 3.5 inches in length, which is typical for some of your smaller pistols. And it is single action. Of course, with the Beretta 92, it's double action in a lot of the later models of Beretta. But this one, the trigger does not actuate the hammer. You can see the levers in here going back and forth. Now, with the magazine inserted and the slide in the rear position, the safety, if you bring it around, it does not quite hit that little slide stop. So we just bring it back, and then it actually springs up into it. And so then with the magazine released, all I have to do is hit the slide stop, and then we're back in business. Guys, it's a very simple design, and it just works. There's not a lot of moving parts, and we'll look at it when we disassemble it. But obviously, this was from 1934, and a lot of the technology just hadn't reached where it is today. Now, one thing you'll notice is the extractor is right here on the top, and so this pulls it out. One thing I will say, and I'll show you during the range time, we did have some malfunctions, and mainly from the rounds coming up and not quite going into the chamber. But I think that a magazine spring would fix that, and we're going to try it, because really this open slide design is very durable, and honestly these have a great reputation for being very reliable for a long period of time, and a lot of that has to do with just the simplicity. Now, when it comes to trigger pull, first off, you're going to have to pull your hammer in the rear position. And as you see, we just have a solid trigger, and we have a very small trigger guard. So a gloved finger is going to have a lot of difficulty getting in here. But here, we're just going to check the trigger pull action. Right here, we have just a little bit of take up. It's pretty close. And a really nice break. There's some resistance just right at first, but again, a nice break. And then for reset, right there. Not a bad trigger, but it is single action. So typically single action triggers are easier to make really good than double action, or for that matter, striker fire. Let's check our trigger pull weight with our Lyman trigger gauge from Brownells. 6 pounds, 7.6 ounces. 6 pounds, 15.7 ounces. That is not bad. Some of these older vintage handguns can have a very heavy trigger pull, and that's not too bad. Now here we have a couple of vintage Berettas that I just want to kind of show, and a little bit of the transition between the different models. First we have the 1951, or the M1951, and this is in 9mm. This is really the predecessor to the Beretta 92, but it is in single action. This is definitely one that's seen a lot. It's not the best finish. In fact, there's a number of countries under Beretta license, including the Egyptian Helwan, that is made exactly the same. So this was used with a lot of countries. In fact, this was produced from 1949 to 1980, and it was 1975 when the Beretta 92 came out. So this actually lapsed over the Beretta 92, which is a little bit surprising. But there were a lot of countries that were using this handgun. First off, our takedown lever is here, and we have a notch, and you can bring it back, set it in, and then you can pull it out. Also, with the slide stop, it's been extended, and it still has that where you bring the slide back, you can lock it back to the rear position. So that's a little bit of an upgrade, even though this was, again, made previously to the Beretta M1934. We have the grips. They have just serrations. Right here is our mag release, down here at the bottom of the grip, and we have 8+1 in the magazine. And serrations, and the top of the slide is open, just like your standard Berettas. But again, a single action option, and trigger pull is pretty close to the M1934. And then we have the Beretta 80S. Now this was designed in 1958, and there are some upgrades to this one that really eclipse the 1934, and it actually replaced the 1934. And production went all the way until 1985. This is in 380 ACP. Typically it has some plastic grips on it. I put these walnut grips just because I thought it looked nice. Had those kind of target grips. Again, we have our mag release right here, and has that open slide design. One thing they've done though is they have a safety here on the frame, which is more of your traditional safety. And that's really one of the big pluses, but they still retained that same slide lock. So when you bring it back, you can just lift it up and then lock in your slide. So while this is not the safety, and the safety's been moved to the back, which I think is a big plus, and the magazine release is here instead of the heel type mag release. But it does have that finger groove on the end. And we have witness holes as well. But you need to have the magazine removed to release the slide. And they do not have a magazine disconnect, which I'm a big fan of not having them. But this has a little more of a slim trim design, more like your Walther PPK, but you know, really you can see the family resemblance coming through. But I would be remiss not to bring out the Beretta Model 92, and this is the S model. So this is an early Model 92. It has the mag release here at the bottom, and it still has those standard Beretta magazines, but all the same features as your Beretta, but the safety's a little different. It's just a lock safety. It's not the hammer drop. But overall, this is pretty much what Beretta took to make the current 92s. And these were designed in 1975, and of course, they're still being made presently, just not with this mag release, or now with a decocker. But we also have the Model 85, or the 80 series, and 80 and 81 were in 32 ACP, and then the designation up from that were 380. Now this happens to be the Model 85, which has a single stack mag, which I do have one of the Beretta 86s with a double stack mag. But these were introduced in 1976, and they were produced up until the 1980s. And this, to me, has been one of the most beautiful guns that Beretta has produced. But now they have the 80X Cheetah, and that's a pretty phenomenal handgun in itself. But a lot of upgrades. This does have your standard frame safety, and you have a slide stop here, and of course it has that design that is Beretta with that open slide. And to be honest, the sights were upgraded as well. Big thank you to Fiocchi for sponsoring our ammo, all made in the USA, one of the biggest suppliers of ammunition in the country. And these little magazines, you just get one. I know there are others available. It takes just a little bit longer, but it's well worth it. Taking one of these vintage guns out and shooting it, it's just a lot of fun. And these hold 7 rounds. Guys, I'm a big fan of Berettas, and I really like their vintage handguns. This is a Model 1934. There were over 1 million of these made. They served in the Axis forces all across Europe. It's a 7+1 magazine.
It's a cool open-ended mag, and it's just got that open slide design. Sights are pretty minimal, but actually this is pretty accurate. But at first we had a couple of malfunctions, and then it's just working great so far. So, you know, a lot of times with these surplus guns, you may have to do a little tweaking. But this one is a beautiful gun from Atlantic Firearms. I was really pleased with it. But that open slide typically is very reliable. It gives a lot of reliability. And again, case in point, sometimes they can just have some issues. And I'll tell you, Wolf Springs make springs for a lot of these. But that heel design magazine, you know, it's different and it takes a little getting used to. The little finger rest on the bottom kind of curls up in your hand. But overall, these were really classics. Now, while Beretta is 500 years old this coming year, they didn't start actually producing guns until World War I because they wanted to help the military, and I thought that was pretty interesting. We just loaded up another magazine just to give you a feel for it, but I'll tell you, it's smooth, and that's one of the things about Beretta. And a lot of these older guns, because the slide rails go with the slide and the frame, it really gives it a very smooth shooting experience. And typically that's what we've been seeing. We had a few malfunctions at first, but then it started airing out. But you know, you got your recoil spring, you have your magazine spring, and again, you can get replacements. But these old surplus guns, guys, once they're gone, the price goes up. And so these are really a great investment, and it's just a part of history.
Now for disassembly, and guys, this is the most unusual disassembly I've ever seen, especially with a very small, older vintage firearm. It's surprisingly simple. So we're going to relieve our magazine or release it, check the chamber, make sure the gun is empty. Now you want to go ahead and bring your slide stop around. Then you want to go ahead and bring your slide back, and it will engage your slide stop. Next, take something that's non-marring and just tap. Just like that. Then you can relieve your barrel and bring it right out of the top of the slide. Disengage your slide stop, just like that, and the slide will come forward, and your recoil spring and your guide rod. And guys, that is it. That is really simple and definitely very different. Now when it comes to your slide stop, and I'm going to show you this, see how it just kind of flops around. Well, there is tension on this slide stop. So once you take your recoil spring and guide rod and you put it back into place, this is what sets the tension on your slide stop. So I thought that was pretty fascinating. Honestly ingenious. Very simple design. In fact, there's only 37 parts to this handgun, which gives it really a lot of durability. There's not a lot that can go wrong with this handgun, mainly your springs, and that would be the one thing that could cause a few issues. But thank goodness there's Wolf Springs, and they do spring kits for a lot of the different vintage handguns. I haven't seen it specifically for the 1934, but I have bought spring kits for a lot of different firearms. When it comes to the slide, again, also very simple design and very well machined. I mean, this is old world machining. Now for reassembly, very simple again. Go ahead and take your recoil spring, put it in your guide rod, and put it into, which there's a cavity that fits right there under your chamber. And then take your slide, and right here is a small little hole under your dust cover, and line up your slide rails, and then bring it back and just line it up with that dust cover. And then as we bring it back, we really want to go ahead and have it in the fire position so it'll lock just like that into place. Then take your barrel, put it in, and you want to drop it down, and then it just locks in. In fact, this just goes just past your mag well. And then what we're going to do is release our slide stop, just like that. And we're back in business. The one thing about this barrel is the slide itself retains the barrel in the frame. And because of the momentum, there's no way this barrel is going to come out. It's a proven design, and again, it's seen a lot of combat. And then you want to make sure your safety's off to test for function. And we're back in business. All right, guys, as far as price, these were running $349 on the Atlantic Firearms website. And of course, it did come with the free holster. I am seeing some actually for $299. They don't seem to be as in good condition, at least what they're showing. And a lot of times when you order firearms like this, getting a sample like this is not always the case. So when you're buying surplus firearms, you need to realize that. That's just part of the deal. They get them in large volume, and so they can't go through and cherry pick, even though some companies have, which here is a perfect example of that. And it's just what it is. This is a military surplus firearm, and this is the way it came. But what are some pros and cons? First off, it's a very vintage piece of history, and that's a huge plus. It isn't a modern caliber, 380 ACP, a lot of things that you can still get to repair these as far as the springs, and I'm sure that there are other parts out there. A lot of times they'll even have replacement grips, things like that. And as far as functionality, we did have a few issues with some reliability. I think a lot of that had to do with the magazine spring, and we're going to trade that out and just see. But the more we shot it, the more reliable it was. So it's definitely an easy fix. But these have a huge reputation for being very reliable, and so definitely it's something minor. It's a classic. It feels really nice in your hand, and the accuracy was extremely good. This is a piece of old world engineering and manufacturing, and that's probably one of the big draws for me, but really the history behind this gives it a whole nother realm. No, this is not like a modern firearm, and I'm not going to compare it to it. This is what it is. But one of the things about surplus firearms is when they're coming in, they're fairly reasonable. But then once that dries up, all of these handguns will go up in value. We're not seeing the surplus market like we were before, where we were seeing crates and crates of firearms. Another thing though about Atlantic, and I will say this, is they have incredible customer service. They didn't send me this handgun. I just bought it off their website, and I've bought others just because I saw it, I wanted it, and so all my dealings with Atlantic Firearms has been stellar, which we'll talk about in an upcoming video of a rifle that I bought from them, and man, they shocked me at how well they treated me. So while there are not really any cons, because it's this type pistol, this is what you're getting, and it's in the lineage of the Beretta firearms. Guys, Beretta has a long history, and of course you can see the evolution of the different models, and they are still producing some really excellent firearms today. It's just kind of cool to see the transition and to pull one out of history from 1934 or even before. So guys, like I've said in the past, when these surplus firearms come into the country, it's a great time to pick them up because they're typically reasonable. And once these dry up, the price goes up. And having something like the Beretta M1934, I mean, it's just a piece of history. And it's one of those firearms that when you take it out to the range, it just brings you back to those times. Guys, we live in the golden age of firearms, and there are so many choices. But yet, don't forget about those old tried and true models. I mean, they're still viable for self-defense. Plus, they just look cool. Guys, a big thank you to Atlantic Firearms. While I did purchase the gun, they always have great customer service, and they're just great to deal with. Be strong, be of good courage. God bless America. Long live the Republic. Pretty small firearm for the time, and yet it's just, I don't know. You're not going to really get a gloved hand in here. Okay. You're going to get a gloved hand in here. That'll be interesting. Beretta has a long history of producing firearms. 5, which was in 380 32 AC. The range, just a piece of history. Okay.